Hey everyone, and welcome to another Planet Zoo video. Today we are actually going to talk about climbing, and it's not really a tutorial, it's basically an analysis of how the climbing system in Planet Zoo works and why it causes so many issues but still is amongst the greatest things that the game offers. So if you guys are interested, stick with me. It's gonna be a very interesting video. We are going to talk about a lot of details when it comes to climbing. I even have some pictures for you explaining how the technology behind this works, and I watched a whole bunch of videos from Frontier about climbing and so on and so forth. So if you guys are interested, stick with me. But first of all, I've got a little message for you before we jump into the actual video. So a couple of months ago, BenQ sent me over a screen bar for my computer to test, and I did test it for half a year now, and I have to say I'm quite happy with it. Surely it's not really on the most affordable side of things, it's 99 euros, but I can say it has a lot of advantages over other screen bars I have used in the past. So first of all, the holding mechanism is very strong. I never had an issue, it's not once fallen down or anything, and I have to say the adaptive light is very neat. So what you can do is basically put it on your screen, put on the adaptive light, and it automatically sets the light to how your environment is. But surely you can control it yourself by hue saturation and the strength of the light yourself. So during the last couple of months in lockdown and so on, I used it quite a lot and I'm happy with it. But again, as I said, you have to decide on your own. There are more affordable options out there. However, what this thing does it very good. So I can only recommend, if you have the money to put it on that one, this is a very recommendable thing in terms of a screen bar. But you gotta check it out yourself, and then this is it. There's a link in the description down below. You can check it out, but now back to the video. Alright, here we are now in the video, and before we go into the real detail, let's talk about climbing just in general. So, in this game, animals can climb. Some animals do climb actually just to reach certain spaces, and some other animals, just as for example the gorilla over here, has a dedicated climbing need. I do have the Sandbox settings turned on. I should quickly turn them off. So we do have the default preset. Let's quickly do that. So you can actually see they do have a dedicated climbing need. So what's the difference? Well, first of all, if we click on that animal, you can see that there is a green marker. This green line down here in this item marks that this is a climbable piece, and this means that this is a climbable region for those animals. You can see I've built a couple of different bridge designs over here, which is necessary. We're going to talk about that in a second, why I chose to take those different ones. And you can see that this adds together to a navigatable area. Now watch what happens if I go in, and I'm going to delete all of these over here, just to give you a little example of how the game actually works. So now we click back into this one, and you can see the navigatable area is down to 0. Let's just wait a little second until it's recalculated, because now at least it is a little bit better. There you go, we've got 21 square meters of climbable navigatable area, which means that this area over here is calculated as 21 square meters. So basically how that works is that this distance between here adds to the piece itself, and each piece has a certain, let's say, a certain number of square meters that it fills in, and this is a number of pieces. And so we could now go and calculate how many pieces I used over here, divide 21 by the amount of pieces, and then you would know how much one of those items adds to the overall navigatable climbable area. It's a little bit of a pity that it's not given in the pieces. So if you go, for example, into habitat and enrichment items, I basically used this lock over here. If you go in here, it only tells you that it is climbable, but it doesn't really tell you how much it adds to it. It would be a nice little information if we know how much this adds. You can find out. There are people out there who did do an analysis of this, but I think this is not really what we need to do. So I just need to quickly hit play again so it can calculate. So now what I'm going to do, I leave the game on play, and I'm just putting in these pieces, and you can see this thing added another 25 square meters. The next thing is going to add another, and so on and so forth. And you can see it's adding to the number of overall climbing need for this animal. And now we have them all in, and it's all set and done. Okay, so this is the basics about how the climbing need itself works. However, there's one issue I have with this. So in this game, animals do not really use the climbing just for the sake of climbing. They always connect it with a need to go somewhere. So you will see monkeys and apes using climbing rigs a little bit more often than other animals, but still they only use it if there is something in an area that is relevant for them. So I put the drink source over here so that there is a need for this animal to go over. I did the same for the other habitats. We're going to talk about this in a bit. There are other animals in here we need to have a look into. But first of all, why did I do all these different elements over here? So if we go back in the overview and click back onto our wonderful friend Nika over here, this little gorilla girl, so you can see this green line going through indicates that this is a climbable piece over here. You can see that this green line is in the middle and goes all the way through here. And I just tested some angles in order to see how they behave. And this is what we are just going to quickly do now. We will let her climb a little bit now to show you the differences of these different pieces. And I really hope that she's going to start climbing now. Let's have a little look what happens now. Can you just finally go? You know what we will do? I will just put a few more enrichment items over there so that she has more reason to go there. So now let's have a little look what happens over here. And we have to see how she's climbing. Now, as you can see, she's wonderfully walking up that area, and now she's walking all the way over this wonderful piece. You can see it's looking pretty accurate, to be honest. It's slightly offset to the left, and this is the first thing we're going to look into. Now, we're going to click onto our friend over here. You can see this is where the climbing is. Now, actually, I was a bit confused because these pieces are exactly the same as these pieces over here. The only difference is I left some space between those pieces here while I merged them into each other on this side. Now, what the game does, it creates this completely green flat area, which to be completely honest, is a little bit of a confusing thing because there is not a complete area. As you can see, the traversable lines are to the left and to the right of the piece, and in between those pieces, there's just one green layer completely created. This means that they basically can, well, just kind of connect between those pieces. But the animal is walking either to the left or the right hand side, which is, to be honest, a little bit of a problem. We are going to talk about this in detail. I have some actual cool pictures for you, just going to show you. We will look at these in a second. But it's very important that we keep that in mind. The animal is always walking to the left or to the right of a certain area. Now let's keep her going for a second and you will see what I mean. I'm just going to speed up the whole process, but you can definitely tell that this option looks somewhat fine and there's not a big deal about this, and we're just going to delete that bridge and we're going to continue doing that with all the others just to show you the differences. And we're back with the second one. You can see she's now tackling the second one, a little bit idling here to the right hand side, and now just to prove this point, now she's taking the right hand side of these pieces. And you can see the movement still looks very fine, you know, the touching these pieces is pretty accurate, and I really like the fact how that works. So she's walking over here pretty nicely, and this is beautiful. You just saw how she changes the side of these things. If we go back into the climbing, you can see this is where she, you know, took this zigzag course to go over. So very interested indeed that you can see it that way. And as I said, before we talk further, I'm just going to show you all the other pieces now. All right, we're back with the next bridge, and you can see now she is moving over this piece, and there's one thing which is now very interesting to notice. This piece is centralized. So if we click on that one, we can see again the green line, and this is where the animal is walking over. But now you can see it's not like 100% accurate. The touch is kind of a little bit off. And now I want to show you something. It is basically the same as if you would put like a square piece down here, and then it would touch the exact bottom of this piece. Now, imagine you would have like a plaster piece which is just straight. It would look like absolutely perfect, you know? And this is how this piece works, because the central axis is where the animal is moving on, but the touch connection, or the touch, so to say, reaction of this animal is still on a straight, flat surface, if you will. I'm going to show you why exactly that is, and why they needed to choose for going for this solution. But anyways, let's just continue real quick and look how it is actually working for the other pieces. All right, she's taking the next one, and you can see now there is a little climbing going on, and this is exactly, oops, I forgot to stop the speed of these climbing. And here you can see the offset is already a little bit more problematic, and the transition into this movement is also not absolutely perfect. And I will just do one more in the end, because these three were all the same. I don't need to show you all of them. This was pretty nice how she rotated and went down backwards, which is pretty nice. But yeah, just in general, I just want to show you the last one to continue talking about this in detail. Alright, let's have a look at the last and most complicated bridge design over here. So before we look deeply into what is happening right now, I'm going to talk you through this piece, because that is the perfect segue into our discussion of these boards we are going to look into in a second. Now, you can see the floating over here, and I'm going to show you that this is basically the same with all of these pieces, and the floating, as you can see over here, is always at the right and same position. So this is the floating you have. And now the interesting question is, why is this happening and why does it look this way? We will talk about this with other animals, and I've got, oh, look at that, the tiger is just doing it perfectly for us, also floating at that area. And now let's talk about the reasoning why that is, and why I still think that the system that Frontier is using, which we're going to analyze now in depth, is really a perfect one, but it still needs some work. Well, actually a lot of work, but you will understand hopefully afterwards why it is not that bad as we think it is, and why there is still a lot of improvement possible in this. Now let's jump over to these boards I made for you. Alright, here we go, and this is the first frame we are looking at. This is basically describing how the climbing works. Now, as you have seen with now the examples, there is a green line going through a piece, and this one over here is a branch I kind of show you, and there is like a green thing going here into the middle, and then there's like a smaller branch which comes out of the bigger one to the right hand side, which is connected by this thing. Now, how the game works is basically the game tells the animal that there is a piece that it can climb on, and now there are some parameters that define how the animal is actually climbing over that piece. So for once is, what is this piece and is this suitable for the species? As you know, some species can go over bigger or smaller pieces, and this is kind of a first check if the size of this climbable piece is suitable for the animal. As you can imagine, a lemur is way smaller than, for example, a grizzly bear, and that means a lemur can easily go over a rope while a grizzly bear couldn't. So the game first of all checks if that is possible. If so, the animal can navigate that thing. But animals have a different relevant angle in terms of climbing. Some animals can climb steeper than others. Or let's put it another way, the change of animation is different when it comes to the different angles. Just as you have seen with the gorilla, as long as the angle is relatively flat and easy to go, easy to handle, the animal will climb just in a straight line with the same animation looping, going up and then transition to a straight, which most likely looks pretty fine. And from a certain angle, let's say 45 degrees and up to 46 degrees, it will change and trigger a different animation that the animal is going to make and going into a vertical climbing animation. And here's the point, the first problem. Now, the animations are made for a certain movement which have a window in which they look fantastic. And this window is smaller than what they set for all animals. Why would they even do this? Well, there's a good reason for that. You don't need, or you just can't do a movement for every angle, because then you would need to make 90 movements for each animal and for each rig, and that's just insane. If you multiply that by the amount of species for this game, you would get like potentially one animal per DLC maybe. So they obviously try to make sure it is somehow looking decent, but also the amount of work is considerable. Now this means that the vertical climbing will look in a window from, or let's say will look brilliant in a window from 80 to 90 degrees, while the normal slope looks good from an angle from pretty much 0 to, let's say, 20 to 23 degrees, and everything in between looks kind of weird because it kind of is in a transition zone which normally would look a bit different. The only good thing is if you have that on, and this is a bit of a weird one, the weight transition of these animals is pretty nicely done on land. So if animals walk on land, basically the weight transition is calculated in. This is a brilliant system. Frontier did an amazing job, which they introduced with Jurassic World Evolution. So the animal actually knows when they're going up a slope and they transition their weight into a realistic position. That does not happen with climbing. The game just checks whether it's a different transition and how's it called, animation to be triggered. And this is one of the biggest issues. So, you know, step one, considerable important thing here is the different angles that they need to consider. But then again, the next point is, what does the piece look like? And I showed you the branch over here. It has a certain distance from the central axis. So you can see this is the tiger standing on top of it, and this is a kind of side image how it would look. But the problem here is that you don't really know how much of a distance there is and how much of a surface they have to walk on, and this is causing the floating. If we go over here, this is how I showed this to you in a bit of a more obvious way. Now we have this wonderful square piece which we looked at the very beginning, and then you have either a central axis on which they walk on, or it is from some other pieces, for whatever reason, it is kind of to the top, and then it creates this straightening thing. But as you have seen, these things are actually to the side of it, and this causes this red area which is not really tackled, but then it's only on to the sides. So the animal is walking nicely on the surface while it's not in the middle but to the sides, because the piece cannot really decide where the central axis should be. While with these climbing pieces, it is perfectly fine in the center, but the overall piece has just too many vertices. It's like too detailed for the game to easily process. So what do you do in game development? You make the piece like a lot more easy in its invisible state, to be honest, but you give this piece has a visual appearance and a, so to say, solid appearance. The solid appearance is made for them to walk on. And if we look back at the branch, just imagine you have to make this all solid. It would create so many different vertices and so many different angles that the animal would be doing a disco dance on top of here. So it would look completely weird if you have a procedural generated animation system like Frontier does. You just cannot make them go on top of this thing in like the perfectly accurate angle of the visual appearance. So what they do is they sculpt a way more simple item on top of it. As I've shown it over here, they just make this very simple squarish piece where it has just a few edges. And this area in between here, where you can see I put these red lines, this is basically a blank area, which is the difference between the visual appearance of the piece and the solid appearance of the piece. And if we go back to our tiger floating, this is exactly this area over here. So if we go back, this might be the piece, you know, this might be the overall size, and then they put like a square in here. You know what, we can just quickly do this. Let's just quickly do this to show you. I don't know what's the smallest piece we have available over here from these. Maybe, oops, maybe it is small enough, maybe it's not. Well, that's certainly not small enough. Maybe we have some plaster pieces from the update. They were pretty small, so maybe we can show it to you with those. Nope, that's not small enough. Also not. I'm just going to click through here if there's anything small enough to show you. I guess we'll end up with the Switch again, as always. I guess so. So we're going to do this with the Switch. So let's quickly do this with the Switch. Now I'm just going to show you what happens if I would be to be Frontier and simplify that piece. So let's see. Yeah, that could be. And then I'm just going to bring this down, do it like so. Okay. And then we're just going to do that. And now what we need to do is basically choose these 4 pieces. Well, let's just take that one too. Just make a group out of it, and then we are just going to make sure that this is going to be a long... Wait, is this still in the building? No, it's not. So let's just bring 1 and 2 and 3. And now we're just going to do the same again. I'm just going to show you real quick how this looks if you do this completely correct. Like this. So just imagine that this is the solid piece, okay? And I'm going to move this in. And as you can see, Now maybe they just have that a bit higher. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, there you go. And now you can see this is how the piece would actually work as this solid. I just put that also in the wrong space, but I mean, you get the idea, okay? So this is the solid piece that you would have. So basically the animal is walking over like that. And I'm pretty sure that they maybe separated that a little bit so that they said, okay, there is like a little incline in here, maybe in like so. And then there's like another straight piece over here again, just to simplify this. But this is obviously causing the movement. Yeah, it's obviously boxed now, but you get the idea, okay? So this is how this works. Now, why does this actually cause these irritations in the game? So, the smaller the piece are, the less obvious the problem is. And that's also the reason why we all said, and I think we can all agree on that, the capuchin monkeys and the lemurs and stuff, that looks most likely pretty accurate. There are two reasons to that. First of all, their animation is a kind of bit more jumping anyways. So it's, they are in the air quite some time while doing so it's not like weighting that heavy, and the pieces are smaller. So the smaller the piece, visually, the difference between the visual and the solid piece is not that big. So I visualize that over here. So have the big branch, these areas are seemingly pretty big to see, and the smaller you get with a rope, for example, they blend into each other almost. Okay, now as we understood this, we have to talk about how the skeleton works of these animals. Now, you have to imagine now that this is, for example, the skeleton of a tiger. That's like the belly down here. This is like the upper leg, that's the lower leg, and this is where the paws are, okay? And so the animals all have a skeleton. This is a very simplified version of it, just to give you the brief idea. Now, if you have the skeleton, you can see these animals having two different checks, so to say. The first check is like a sphere around the feet, which makes them more or less notify what is in their area around. This is, by the way, not only for the climbing, it's also important for sound. So this area actually checks for what material they are touching while they're walking, and then it triggers which sound is going to be played. So for example, if the right paw is already dipping into gravel, while the left and the rear paws, for example, are still in sand, the transition into the sand sound is like 25% already for gravel, and then 75 already still for sand, and so on. So it transitions over. A brilliant way of doing it. They showed it when we've been in the office, and it's just a very great system to make it very natural. So you can actually differentiate between paws that are in gravel and the other ones in sand. And this is why they use this check area, like the sphere around which checks for the environment. And same goes for climbing. And this is where the big issue is happening as well. So if this front checks for a different angle than the rear, it's causing confusion in which animation has to be triggered. And if we go back, before we talk further about that, if we go back real quick to this thing, I'm gonna highlight again, you can see that there are some problems. You can see how these green areas are now intersecting each other. There's like a little bit of a weird thing over here. It's gonna be wider here. And this is the main issue. Now you have to imagine if this animal keeps on walking, and you can see now this is actually working pretty fine for what it is. But this left paw is now checking for that area, while this right back paw is still on that area. And this can actually cause confusion. So they basically did already a good job in most likely streamlining this as much as possible, which I guess, I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I'm guessing it's kind of averaging what they do have in their closed environment. So basically it's not checking, like not the first second they're checking, this is already triggering a new animation. It most likely is kind of trying to wait for all of the paws or like the whole animal checking what this is. But like, as I said, the problem is that this is not made into the weight distribution. So if you look at this, the whole body weight distribution to the front is a little bit on the problematic side of things. I'm going to show you how different that looks when they are moving on a hill. I hope they're not going to be boxed now. Oh, well, they are going to be boxed now. Just going to quickly make that again. And I'm going to make this dry so we can see that once it's coming back. I'm quite sure that she's coming back right away. Let's have a little look, because I want to show you the difference, and this is already a segue into what could be improved. Now, We just wait, make this slower. I'm just going to hope that this is pretty obvious to you when she's moving up, hopefully. So let's have a little look if she's... There you go. Now, notice how she's actually leaning the whole body forward, and this looks so much more realistic. This is really, really great. It's a completely different approach to look at how she's actually utilizing the transition between going up and down, even in here. So the reason why this is so much better than those pieces is also down in the explanation we were just talking about. Now, you can see these little green lines I put you below the paws, which is two-dimensional, and these are there to check for the mesh of the ground. And now let's quickly talk about what is a mesh. So you have to imagine that once you have a piece, and this is what I try to show you by these things, these pieces are simplified, and the mesh is basically the underlying geometry of where they can put their feet down and not. So the ground basically is a complete mesh of a lot of triangles. So you have to imagine that if you build a little hill, for example, if you build these hills, and sometimes if you do it too strong, you can even see that it's going to be completely edgy. But the idea behind this is this creates an overlying mesh of things. So basically you have to imagine there is like a triangle here, then there's a triangle there, and you almost can envision this like in a 3D program, like in Blender, when you have like a solid face, and this solid face is divided into triangles, and then you would take a nip in the middle and just pull it up. Everything is pulling up like a tent. Now this creates a very nice area in which the animals can understand where to put their paws, and so give an information to the body for the weight distribution. So in order for the terrain, Frontier has already done an insane job in making that work beautifully. The only difference is the terrain is bigger, by far bigger. So there are a lot more simple vertices after each other, and this is why this is actually a very great texture to show that. So you can see each of these tiles of the dry area down here has a different angle, so to say. But if we look closely, you can see it isn't. So there is like a straight face over here, then there's a straight face over here, and there's another one over here. So it's a lot simpler for the animal to calculate how the weight distribution has to be, while these pieces are simplified in order to reduce the processing demand of the game. And this is now the big final step into what I wanted to talk about. I really hope that, I know it was long, I know it was a lot of detail, but I really hope you understood the details now of the climbing system. Maybe one last thing to add to this. This is all procedurally generated, which means there is not a, there's not a looping animation for each of these pieces. The animal itself has a certain asset of animations baked into the animals. Let's say the gorilla has, well, I don't know, 20 different climbing animations and 10 different transition animations, and the game decides upon the creation of your habitat, the way how you put these pieces together. The game is calculating how the animals are going to follow the instructions that the pieces give them. So, and this is what creates sometimes the confusion and the bugging and the glitches, because this procedural system is working on its own, and sometimes it gets the information wrong. So the more simple you build your bridges like that, the better it will look, obviously, because it's very obvious for the algorithm to tackle that. So this is the main reason why we have these glitches. Now, what could be a solution to that? So the first solution that you could come up with is just simplify the amount of pieces that are climbable in order to make those pieces more detailed. A simple way of doing this would be to make sure that all the construction pieces are not climbable, and actually only have dedicated climbable pieces in this segment over here. And you may have noticed, but these pieces, if you use those, most likely work great, because these pieces have already been made exactly and specifically for climbing. So if you put these down, for example, that thing over here, and we just do the same thing again and have a look, well, I should move that up because it's on ground now, and have a look into this piece, which for whatever reason is... Okay, wait a second. I'm just going to put this thing to it, and then that should be fine. There you go. So you can see this piece is already worked on, and there are a lot of different ways of climbing made into that. It's always clean, there are a lot of possibilities to move on top, and it looks potentially really good, while other pieces don't have that. Now, if we would have this, potentially we would get, by the amount of DLCs we have right now, let's say we would have 40 to 60 dedicated climbing pieces by now, but those pieces could be a lot more detailed because all the millions of other pieces would not exist to cause trouble with the algorithm. And by doing so, you would obviously make sure that there are a lot less glitches because, you know, you can make sure that these pieces are tested and tested all over again, made sure to program all different potential angles into these pieces and so on and so forth, even make a weight distribution working by just making the mesh of this piece a lot more simple and a lot more easy for them to calculate. Now, it's not. And the big question is, would we even want this? Would we want freedom or would we want to have perfection? And here I come now with the conclusion. After thinking about this a lot and after being very annoyed, especially by some habitats for the clouded leopard I made, I still believe that this system is great. It is definitely the best climbing system in a zoo game we ever had. And as much as I love these wonderfully designed pre-animated items, for example, you know, we got this recently. Let's go back into habitats and let's say we just type in sun bear, then we will get this wonderful hammock. And I don't know if you guys have seen the animation for the hammock. I can't show it to you right now. We don't have the suitable animal in here, but this animation is obviously freaking amazing. The reason for that is that they programmed that specifically for those animals, and this is why you only have 2 animals for that right now, because you have to program and animate each individual movement solely for that piece. If it weren't, if this would be a hammock you built yourself, you could have that for every animal, but you still would have a lot more glitches to it. And this is the central question. Would you actually have more glitches, but then again have it for all animals? Or would you have this perfectly programmed thing, but then have it for less animals? I think I would love to have all of these options that we have in the game for all animals. And in the future, because this is solely a question of processing power and of the reduction of the meshes and of the solids that the animals can tackle. So in the future, if Frontier would be to go and improve the solids of these things and improve the amount of vertices underlying to those pieces, it would naturally improve the climbing. If they would be to improve the overall size recognition of the animals because there is more information in these meshes that are more detailed, the climbing would naturally become more good looking. If they would be to enable the weight distribution system to the various angles of pieces, it would naturally look so much better. The reason why they don't do this is because it would be laggy AF. Even on my crazy rig, it would be lagging as hell. I mean, we have so many climbable pieces. Let's just enable the filter. And if we go in here, just have a look. Just have a freaking look how many climbable pieces we have in here, let alone. And then we have all these pieces in. Also, by the way, this tag is totally wrong. There are way more pieces than those that are climbable in the game. Actually, there's the rope even missing, isn't it? Yeah, there's even, oh no, the rope is in here. But there are so many pieces that are climbable. And also, the plaster, for example, all this kind of stuff is also climbable in a way. This is just for the climbable in all directions tag, I guess. But still, all these pieces we have in the game that are climbable add to the complexity of the system that it has to be calculated. And oh boy, this is completely and seriously crazy. So, all I wanted to say with this video is this is a freaking complicated system, and I love the fact that Frontier was brave enough to go that route and try this completely free locomotion system, as they call it. It is far from being perfect, you know, don't get me wrong. This is not to defend Frontier in any way or to praise the system more than it should or whatever. I'm just saying that this system as it is right now is freaking complicated, and also has a lot of its origin of the problems is laying in the way the system was, you know, concepted in the first place and thought out in the first place. But I'm still sure that this is the right way to go, and I'm really hoping that Frontier is willing to improve a lot in this. And now to end this video, I'm giving a few little ideas how to give some quick fixes, so to say, to the system that could be used, you know, as long as there is not a huge engine upgrade or whatever that is, you know, helping to keep the performance good while adding so much more meshes. I would love to see to be able to enable and disable the climbability of an item. The reason why is I could go in and just make a beautifully looking bridge and then just put some working pieces below it from the climbing menu and make it look good. So my idea would be, in order to make these things look good, I would now go into, let's say, the climbable pieces, and I want to use these wonderful climbable log like that. And now what I could do is, and this is something I tried already, but the problem is it's causing complete utter crap. But you know, what I could do now is, I would love to just, take that piece, and just gonna repaint this way, okay? I'm just going to make this like so. I'm gonna bring this down, and I'm going to bring this up again, and so on. You get the idea, okay? So, and when I've done this, I could basically just hide this in any kind of piece. The only thing is I would need to click on this piece now and say, okay, you know what, I don't want you to be a solid piece for these animals. It's basically invisible. They would basically go through it, but the way you have set it out with the climbing pieces below, they would still be able to climb it, and it would not cause too much trouble. This would be a fix I would love to see. It would basically change nothing about the overall system, but it would still give us the creative freedom of creating some things. This way you could make basically all trees climbable if you want. This way you could make basically all kind of forms and stuff climbable, and by utilizing these pieces that work the best, which I figure are the climbing pieces, and these ones I figured are also freaking amazing. If you use this and you keep the distance between, these pieces are amazing. Just to give you the idea, this is the African wooden sunshade support. The climbing works freaking good with those pieces, just as a little tip if you haven't figured that yet. It's amazing, you know, and all these other testing rigs down here, you know, we don't need to really look into that too much, because basically at the end of the day, oh, by the way, we can just have a little check if the animal is doing the climbing here, or if it's just going, yeah, no, it's blocked, as you can see. And this is what I meant, you know, this would need to be deleted, and then if I could say, hey, don't check it as a solid piece, they could actually walk over it. Anyways, guys, I really hoped you found this video helpful and informative, and maybe I could actually solve some of the issues that some people have with the climbing by just explaining why it is so freaking difficult to understand, and you know, why we will have all these glitches, and they won't certainly go away by a patch, because the nature of the system would not allow them to solve this. However, by the time in the future, and hopefully a successor of this game, they have a lot of experience in this system already, and hopefully they can tackle all these little issues by, you know, tweaking the pieces, maybe reducing the amount of pieces, but then give us more evolved pieces that, you know, have a better mesh, have a better system in terms of how they check the climbability, it's not even a word, of the piece itself, and also the weight distribution, the different angles that they need to consider, and all these kind of things. Anyways, a lot of info. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think about the climbing system. Would you love to have it simplified? Would you have been okay with only having different animations? Or do you love the freedom that we have in the game, that you can basically create whatever you want, and they can theoretically use it in the way it should be. Please let me know, start a discussion down there, and if you have some ideas how to improve it, of course let me know as well. I really hope you guys enjoyed this kind of different video, and I hope you guys are going to have a wonderful day. I talk to you in the next one, and don't forget to subscribe if you found this helpful. If you want to have more of this content, if you are here for more Planet Zoo, Planet Coaster, and just in general simulation game content, make sure to follow me here. And if you guys have Instagram, please give me a follow over there as well. I'm trying to push there a little bit to, you know, give you guys some more cool background stories of me as a person and stuff like that. So if you guys are interested for whatever weird reason in that, give me a follow there as well. But now, enough of that. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, everyone. Enjoy your time, and goodbye.